This video is about a debate created to choose who's the guiltiest and the most innocent character within those assigned for Romeo and Juliet's death from the Shakespearean play.
The first character who is to blame for the death of Romeo and Juliet is Romeo himself, because if he did not go to the party, he would have never met Juliet, and Tybalt would have never known that he was there. The second reason is the fact that Romeo killed Tybalt to avenge Mercutio's death, but he could have avoided, because if he did not kill Tybalt, he wouldn't have been banished. The third reason is the fact that Romeo killed himself because he could have thought about it, he could have waited longer, because it was not necessary. In conclusion, if Romeo had put more time into thinking what he was doing, the tragedy may not have occurred.
Romeo is a young 16-year-old boy, impulsive and passionate, an innocent victim of the feud between the two families, the Montague and the Capulet. He's not interested at all in violence or their feud. His only interest is love. Romeo goes to extremes to prove his seriousness of his feelings. He secretly marries Juliet, the daughter of his father's worst enemy. He would rather die than live without his beloved. Romeo's love matures over the course of the play, from the shallow desire to be loved to profound passion. Love compels him to sneak into the garden of Juliet, risking death simply to catch a glimpse of her. It compels him to suicide upon hearing of Juliet's death. Had Romeo not had such depths of feeling, the love he shared with Juliet will never have existed in the first place. Romeo suggests that he's not worthy of Juliet's touch. The fact that he describes the first kiss as tender illustrates Romeo's gentle and true emotions and feeling for Juliet. This shows that their first meeting was charged with love and desires for one another. In the Act 1, Scene 5, he says, to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. We perceive that Romeo is innocent due to his apparent love for Tybalt and his clear disesteem to the fight unfolding. He wanted to stop the fight. He cared too much for him in order to brawl him. However, when a lifelong friend, Mercutio, is murdered in front of his own eyes, he is shaken to the core. Romeo kills Tybalt for revenge. He did this while not in the correct state of mind, clearly in a haze of sorrow and guilt, not yet fully comprehending the consequences of his actions. His gentle conflict with Tybalt defines his love for his family and friends. When in Act 3, Tybalt goes to find Romeo to fight him for the harm he's done to him, Romeo says, "I do protest I never injured thee, but love thee better than two canst devise." It meaning that he won't fight him because he's related to him through marriage, even if Tybalt doesn't know that. When Romeo acts as an arbitrator between Tybalt and Mercutio because he understands the repercussion of the imminent fight. Romeo says, "Gentlemen, for shame, forbears this outrage. Tybalt, Mercutio, the prince expressly had forbidden banding in Verona streets. Hold, Tybalt, good Mercutio." Romeo tries to break up the fight, but Tybalt reaches under Romeo's arm and stabs Mercutio. Romeo loved Mercutio. He just wanted him to be safe and didn't want to fight anymore. With his death, he will do anything for vengeance. In the Act 3, he says, "That blade thou gavest me for Mercutio's soul is but a little way above our heads. Stay for thine to keep him company. Either thou or I or both must go with him." This part may be perceived as a threat to someone, but in my opinion, Romeo was just in the depths of despair about losing his friend.
I for sure put more blame on the friar. He was just a bad character. First of all, he married Romeo and Juliet even though he knew it was the wrong thing to do. Therefore, he planned with Juliet to give her a poison, and what's more is that he did not ensure to warn Romeo about his plan, and this led to the death of the two lovers.
Friar Lawrence is one of the guiltiest characters of the story. He knows that marrying quick can have many consequences upon the lovers, and he could get in a lot of trouble if the two families find out that he married them. Another reason Friar Lawrence is to blame is that he tells Juliet to take the sleeping potion. He should have known better than to give potion to a 40 years old. The friar should have put more thought in his plan so the plan would not fail. For such a risky plan, he did not think any of it through. The last reason Friar Lawrence is to blame is that he was not able to get a servant to Romeo to tell him that Juliet was not really dead. He could have sent out multiple servants at different times, or just one himself to ensure that Romeo will get his message. Even though his intentions may seem pure and selfless, at the end of the day, he was just trying to use the situation at his favor, hoping to end the feud between the Capulets and Montagues.
Friar is not guilty, because how can be a friar this much blame for a death? He did everything just for others' pleasure. He did anything to make Romeo and Juliet happy. He got them married, and he organized a plan for them to escape. The second reason, because I think that the friar is innocent, is that he gave the potion to Juliet just to stop her marriage with Paris. I think that was a source of sadness for her. Last reason, because I think that the friar is an innocent character, is that he risked so much to marry Romeo and Juliet, because if one of the families would have discovered that he married them without their consent, he would have gone through severe consequences.
Tybalt is amongst the guiltiest characters from the play. In the first place, he took part in the fight that it's in the beginning of the play. Another reason is him getting mad when he sees Romeo at the Capulets' party and threatens to kill him. If Tybalt was able to realize that Romeo was not causing any harm to the Capulets and be able to hold his temper in, Romeo and Juliet might have survived. The last reason Tybalt can be blamed for the tragedy is the fact that he killed Mercutio. Tybalt did not need to kill Mercutio. It was completely unnecessary. Mercutio's death caused Romeo to get banished from Verona, not allowing Romeo and Juliet to be together. Finally, Tybalt should have been able to hold his anger and not be so cruel.
5 reasons why Tybalt should not be blamed for the lover's death, and these are: the first one is the fact that he just wanted to be loyal to the family, in particular to his uncle, Lord Capulet. So when Lord Capulet pushed him to instigate a grudge, he did. For the success of the family, they all had to participate. Too young to disobey orders, and in addition, the position you had in the society brought you both privilege and responsibility. The fact that he wanted to make his uncle happy, Lord Capulet, doesn't mean that he didn't know what was wrong and what was right, as you can see in Act 1, Scene 5, when he says, "Why, uncle? It's a shame." While Tybalt knew how to control his emotions, Romeo did not. You can see in Act 3, Scene 1, for Mercutio's soul is but a little above our heads, staying for a dine to keep in company. Enter thou, or I, or both, must go with him, meaning that Romeo tried to threaten Tybalt.
Mercutio may not be as strong as other characters, but he for sure can be blamed for being sometimes way too impulsive and not thinking enough about what he's going to do.
Mercutio, in my opinion, is one of the most valuable characters of the play. He loved Romeo, he wanted to keep him safe. He got caught between the feud of the two families and giving his life to protect his friend. The critic Stephen Greenblatt describes Mercutio as a force within the play that functions to deflate the possibility of romantic love and power of tragic fate. Unlike the other characters who blame their death on fate, Mercutio dies cursing the Montagues and Capulets. Mercutio believes that specific people are responsible for his death and rather than some external force. There are three main reasons why Lord Capulet was to blame for the deaths of Romeo and Juliet. Firstly, he allowed Romeo to stay at the Capulet party. If he had kicked him out, Romeo and Juliet would have never met. Secondly, he threatens to disown Juliet if she didn't marry Paris. This causes Juliet and Friar Lawrence to come up with a sleeping potion plan. Lastly, Lord Capulet changed the wedding date to Wednesday. This causes Juliet to take the sleeping potion early. Had he not had changed the date of the wedding, perhaps Romeo will have received the message from the friar telling him Juliet's plan for escaping the wedding. In Act 1, Scene 5, when Tybalt notices Romeo and his friends at the Capulet's party, asks Lord Capulet if he can kick them out, but Lord Capulet replies saying, "He shall be endured. What good man go? I say we shall go too. Am I the master here or you?" Then Tybalt asks again, but Lord Capulet says, "You must contrary me. You are a precox. Go." In the Act 4, Scene 2, on Wednesday, Lord Capulet tells the nurse, "Go nurse, go with her. We'll to church tomorrow."
Lord Capulet wasn't a bad person. The consequences the story had were just the dangers of allowing family honor to destroy a person. Shakespeare described Lord Capulet as a round character because throughout the story he continues changing his moods, the way he behaved. As a second reason, some people could think that he was a bad father, but he was in fact not, because the only thing that he wanted to do was protecting Juliet from like a bad marriage, because he thought that Romeo was not adapt for her. In Act 2, Scene 1, it says, "My child is yet a stranger in the world," meaning he wanted to protect her from the cruelty of the human being. Women were ruled by men. They were just the property of the father or the husband, in case they had a husband. So this possessive behavior doesn't have to be seen as shocking, because it was completely normal at the time. In Act 4, Scene 5, he says, oh child, my soul and not my child, dead and art thou. Alack, my child is dead, and with my child my joys are buried." At the end of the play, Lord Capulet is the first one who makes the move to settle the fight between the two families. So he ends the quarrel, and he is kind of the hero of the story. And as you can read in Act 5, Scene 3, "O brother Montague, give me thy hand. This is my daughter Jointure, for no more I can demand." Finally, there is a reason between Juliet's continuous disobedience and Lord Capulet's rising manipulation, because if she had behaved the way she had to, he wouldn't have been so strict. With 5, Scene 3, he says, "Flower as she was deflowered by him," meaning that he had taken away her virginity and Romeo had made her a worse person. There are 5 reasons why Lady Capulet should not be blamed for the lover's death, and these are: the first one is the fact that Lady Capulet made pressure on Juliet to marry Paris, because the only thing she wanted, just like Lord Capulet, was the well-being of the family and the well-being of the daughter. In Act 1, Scene 2, you see, "But who her, gentle Paris, get her heart, my will to her consent is but a part, and she agreed with her scope of choice, like my consent and fair according voice." In the old families, the mother only gave birth to the children, and they didn't have to raise them. In fact, there was a nurse who had to raise them. Just like she says, Lady Capulet, in Act 1, Scene 3, "Nurse, come back again." As a third reason, it was usual in the Elizabethan age to marry and give birth young, just like Lady Capulet did, because in fact she gave birth to Juliet when she was 14 years old, and she kind of pushed Juliet to marry Paris so young for this reason. The way Juliet falls in love with Romeo at such a young age shows how she resembles her mother more than you would think. Lady Capulet was fearful of her husband, just like most of the city, so even though at some point she tried to tell her husband that Juliet didn't want to marry Paris, she couldn't because she was too afraid to tell him.
Juliet's parents did. The Montagues prevented Romeo's and Juliet's relationship. They didn't care about who Juliet was, and neither the ones of their son. They cared only about the households and the fact that they were in conflict with Juliet's family.
I can see what you're saying, but Lord Montague only wanted the good for his son. In the opening scene, he begs Benvolio to find out what's wrong with Romeo, showing how much he cared about his son. He also tried to defend him once he killed Tybalt, telling the prince that Romeo has just done what the law otherwise would have done. We can see how he loves his son to the point of defending him, even in the face of a murder.
Juliet could be considered guilty because she avoided marrying Paris, but if she did marry Paris, then her family wouldn't have stopped her from falling in love with Romeo, and she would have given benefit to her family. Moreover, Juliet could be considered guilty because she tried to get herself into a marriage that she could control. In fact, marrying Romeo would have given her freedom, and she considered Romeo to be a tame falcon, just like she says in scene second, when she says, "A tassel gentle."
Juliet was a naive little girl. She grew up too fast for her age, and she has a personality that swings between being mature and immature. Romeo was just a silly boy in love, and Juliet took up from him, having a strong and dominant character, by leading him to do things quickly, as we can see in Act 2, Scene 4, where they marry after one day after they met. We can see also how in Act 3, Scene 5, she forces Romeo to stay with her to the point where he has to tell her that if he didn't go, he would have been killed. This shows how immature Juliet could be and how she could easily get her beloved into trouble for her own sake, which was, in that situation, spending some more time with Romeo. How can a person risk the life of their lover just for their own benefit?
I think that Juliet is innocent because she was just a young girl. She didn't understand the situation she was in, and her thoughts were confused by her love for Romeo. The thing that proved her innocence was that she had just 14 years old, and she was not thinking about what she wanted to do, just following her feelings. We all know that children want everything and immediately. She thought that she was in love with Romeo and she wanted to marry him without thinking about the consequences and about the direction of her. Last thing that proved Juliet's innocence is that her parents wanted to marry her to Paris, a man that she was in love with, and the anger against her parents and decision they made led her to drink the potion just to escape from her situation.
Prince was guilty because he was the one who banished Romeo from Verona. He could have handled the situation differently, maybe trying to help Romeo.
I don't agree with what was said, because Princess Carlos didn't do much. He just did what he had to do as Prince of Verona.
That the character who can be considered the less guilty is Mercutio.
Speaking personally, Mercutio is the less guilty out of the characters because he was just a great friend for Romeo and didn't do anything to lead to the death of the two lovers.